So you did just take my first slide. I was going to say, hey, everyone. Today I'm going to be talking about Airflow in practice. So a little bit about myself. My name is Sarah Schattschneider. I'm a software engineer at Blue Apron on our data operations team. So we are in charge of our data pipeline, which includes ingesting data and events into our data warehouse. Some fun facts about me. My Airflow interests are figuring out cool ways to use it besides just ETL processes, but a lot of my work does include that. We've used it in BigQuery Permissioning, so actually being able to programmatically set up our permissions for our data warehouse. And finally, I really like testing within Airflow. And I've been working with it for about 2 years and hoping to be contributing more to it open source shortly. Today, I'm going to go over the background of some core concepts, then go into Airflow, then talking about evaluating Airflow and the challenges of Airflow. Finally, talking about common use cases and best practices. All right, so now this is when you guys get to raise your hands. So I want to know who's in the crowd. So please raise your hand if you use Airflow on a regular basis. All right, so we have a few of those. Awesome. And who's new to Airflow? Awesome. Hello, friendly new faces. Welcome. So for those of you who are advanced and have already know what most of the core concepts are, bear with me until the end. I get into some really cool in-depth topics then. And yeah, so let's dive into the background of what Airflow is and why you should care. So some of you may recognize this as a cron tab. It kind of depends when you enter the industry. But so in a cron tab, you are determining when to run it. So that's the stars and numbers on the left-hand side. And then you have on the right-hand side what is going to run at that time. So that can be a script or just one command. So for those of you who are unfamiliar with cron, one of the downsides to cron is it has very little alerting. It's really on the user. So I heard a war story from Blue Apron before I joined and before we transitioned everything to Airflow, that we had a snapshotting process that was a cron job. And the only way to know it was working was one engineer every half hour got an email saying it's working. So to figure out when it's not working, you need that one engineer to realize that those really annoying emails have stopped. Yeah, not the best way to be handling your alerting. So Airflow is built on top of cron. It will still use that scheduling, which is fantastic, but it comes with a lot of really helpful things right off the bat, such as the monitoring, alerting, and very fancy UI and CLI. So an important concept to understand is a directed acyclic graph. Here you'll see that the graph is made up of nodes and directed edges. There is only one way to flow through this graph. We have to start at A, and we're going to end at J. But come on, we need a better example than this. So let's go to our foodie metaphor of chocolate cake, because who doesn't like chocolate cake? So when you're making your chocolate cake, you have to get your bowl, you have to get the ingredients, you put all the ingredients in the bowl. Once you have them all in, you're going to mix the batter and so forth. Once you have the batter, and we are looking at putting the batter in the cake pan, we want to make sure our assumptions are met. And that is completed through the dependency graph. We will never put cake batter in cake pan until we have the batter properly mixed and until the cake pan is properly set up. We don't want to put cake batter in an ungreased pan because then you're going to have very sad cake at the end. Not pretty. Okay, so now that we know the basics of cron and DAGs, let's go into specifics around Airflow. What is Airflow? And as a Python developer, why would you be interested in it? First off, it was open sourced by Airbnb in 2015. It is a way to programmatically author workflows. So your DAGs are going to be set up with different tasks in them. Those will be the nodes, and they will be scheduled to run at a specific time. And all of this is written in Python. We have stateful scheduling within Airflow. So this means that when you have your cake pan and your cake batter, you're only going to run that when the dependencies have been met. So you can sleep easy at night. It comes with a really rich CLI and UI, which is very helpful to understand what is currently happening with your different workflows. We also have logging, monitoring, and alerting right off the bat, so you're able to troubleshoot all of these issues when they arise. And because the structure is a DAG and we have all of the tasks, we stay very modular. And this increases the testability and maintainability of these workflows. And overall, Airflow solves many common problems with batch processing, but also can be used in other circumstances. So now that we know the fundamentals, the next stop is to talk about code. So some of you may not see this as totally Pythonic. It is more boilerplate at the DAG level. At the top, you see we have a very simple hello world Python function. Then we have our default arguments that we are declaring. So here you're going to say when this process should start running. You will say the owner and number of retries and some other things. Next, we actually initialize the DAG. So this is where you give the DAG a name. This is where you say the default arguments, and you say when to run. Again, we're seeing those numbers and stars. We'll get into that a little bit later. And below the DAG initialization, we see this, what looks to be a doc string, but it's kind of in a different format. Some of you may recognize that as Markdown. You are able to use Markdown for your documentation for both at the DAG level and the task level, which is very helpful for other programmers to understand what is happening in your workflow. And now we're in the actual tasks. We have two tasks here. We have start and hello. Start is a dummy operator. These are really useful when you have a larger DAG. It's not necessary in this case, but wanted to introduce the concept. And then we have a Python operator. And we see the Python callable is calling the hello world function that we have at the very top. In the very last line here, we have start, bit shift operator to hello. And this is actually defining the dependency structure for the DAG. All right, what does this look like in the UI? It looks pretty nice, doesn't it? All right, so you'll see at the bottom of the screen on the left-hand side, you'll see two blocks. You'll see a start pointing to hello. This is your DAG and the dependency structure that is made from the previous code we saw. Here we'll also be able to see some really interesting things about what's happening. Over here, we see the different colors around the task will show if it's running, if it's successful, if it's failed, if it's up for retry, and so forth. We also have on the upper right-hand side, we have the schedule interval. So we know right away how frequently this is running. And then we have, finally, some tabs across the top to have different metrics and insights into what's going on. I want to highlight two metrics for those who are new to Airflow. On the left-hand side, we have the Gantt chart. This is going to show what is currently running or what has been successful. If it's running, it will be light green, similar to in the previous view. If it's dark green, it's been successful. So you also can see when it finished. On the right-hand side, we have the task duration graph, which is really interesting because you can use these two if there were a failure in your system to be able to give an ETA to your downstream consumers, being able to see what's left running, how long it has historically taken, do some math, and get it to them. All right, now let's move into more in-depth Airflow concepts. We have hooks, operators, and tasks. Again, all of this is written in Python. So your hooks, which are going to encapsulate all interactions with different APIs, are going to be able to use any Python API of a third party or utilize REST and things like that. You then have an operator, which will instantiate one or two hooks and complete a specific goal. With your DAG, you want to make sure each task is only completing one goal. If you have a whole workflow in one Python operator, that's not good. You should look at the code. And then finally, we have a task, which is going to initialize an operator and give it specific variables to be able to run the task. So going back to our cake example, our hooks would be a cake pan and an oven. The cake pan will have different functions such as the cake pan size, putting batter in it, and yeah, that's about it. Oh, also greasing it because we need to make sure it's prepared. Then we have the oven. We can open the door, we can close the door, we can preheat it, things like that. So with this operator of put cake pan in oven, we are going to have this operator initialize these two hooks and be able to actually run all of the functions necessary to complete this goal. So we are going to have it preheated, we're going to open the oven door, put the cake pan in, close the oven door, and be able to, that is the put cake pan in oven. And then finally, we have the task, which is initializing it. So we're going to say, use Sarah's oven, use the round cake pan, and actually with the connection IDs so we know where we're authenticating. So to bring this back to the DAG we saw at the beginning, this is going to be the last operator, the last task in this DAG. Real quick, let's give this a real example that a data engineer might be seeing. So this is an example within the Google Cloud Platform. This can be easily applied to AWS and other platforms. So you have two hooks. You're going to have a hook for your Google Cloud Storage, similar to AWS S3, and Google BigQuery, the data warehouse, similar to Redshift. And in these hooks, you're going to be using these already exist, but they use the Python API to be able to interact with each of these systems. The operator will use the GCS hook to get the file and then ingest it into BigQuery. And finally, we have our tasks, where we are saying the source path, the destination table, and which connections to use. So we're properly authenticating with each system. How I mentioned before, there are a lot of hooks and operators already existing in the Airflow ecosystem. So you might recognize parts of your tech stack already here, and you would be able to easily transform these into workflows. Again, lots of operators. The one I would like to point out is the Python operator. You will be able to run any Python function within the Airflow ecosystem, so you have that logging, monitoring, and alerting on failures to understand more of what's happening. Now that we understand Airflow and its core concepts, let's go into evaluating it. What value does Airflow add? So Airflow is able to elegantly retry errors. That might not sound so interesting, but if you have a workflow that calls to any other service, which I'm assuming you will have, and you get a 503 error, that transient error from them at 3 a.m., we don't want to be called, right? We want to keep sleeping. So if you're going with Airflow, you're going to be able to define how many times to retry a task, and then hopefully you'll be able to get past that transient error. You're able to alert on failures within Airflow. That can be an email operator, a Slack operator, and many others. You're able to rerun a specific part of the DAG. So if you have a DAG with 20 tasks and one failed with 3 downstream of it. So if you're looking at the DAG, you see that there are 4 tasks that have failed and 3 have specifically failed because of upstream. And we only want to rerun those 4. You're going to be able to clear downstream of that one failed and clear all 4. What this allows you to do is save time by, instead of having to rerun the whole process, just the one part that failed. All right. And finally, Airflow also supports distributed execution. So multiple machines can contribute towards the same jobs as workers. And overall, Airflow enables your ETL jobs to be a lot more fun to develop. They're readable and maintainable. So now let's dive into some Airflow development and how would you actually get this set up for yourself. At Blue Apron, we have our Airflow instance deployed in a Docker container in a Kubernetes cluster. So this is just as easy as any other service at Blue Apron. So we haven't had any issues there. And then for local development, to add the Airflow connections programmatically, we have a set of 2 scripts. One is a bash script, which will actually copy the credentials, either JSON files or environment variables, into the Docker container. And we have a Python script that will then create Airflow connections and add them to the Airflow database. So just to note, I did recently put out a blog post on this, so you can find that later to look into this some more. So evaluating how easy it is to get started, because it has such an active community, we have so many third parties already integrated with hooks and operators. So a lot of what you're going to be interested in doing is already possible, which is great. The advantage of Airflow still continuing to use the cron scheduling allows a lot of flexibility with when tasks are going to run. So the first example here, we have it running Monday at 4 a.m. And then the second example is the third day of every month at 10:05. So we have a lot of flexibility with when exactly to run it, day of week and day of month, which is helpful for different business processes. With the cron scheduling, we get time zone safe because we use UTC, and we have flexibility, how I said, in determining when to run it, which is great. Now let's go into, is there a bad side to Airflow? Have there been any challenges for Blue Apron? One challenge we've found is with upgrades, and this is due to the fact that we were an early adopter and actually created a lot of custom hooks and operators. So there are a few ways to mitigate this pain. We are trying to contribute more regularly to upstream, so then we're in part of the package and upgrading is no problem. We also have a staging environment DAG that has realistic data running through it to be able to catch if any of our operators are no longer going to work with the upgrade and figure out where we need to go fix. And finally, we have better unit testing. So any custom hook and operator we create, we want to make sure we have a unit test to know what the expected behavior is. Another interesting concept within Airflow, which was challenging at the beginning, but we've figured it out, is data sharing. There are 2 unique ways of data sharing within Airflow. The first is XComs. This is cross-communication between tasks. So if you have a return value from one task, you can access that in another task. And this keeps it so that each node in your DAG has one goal that it's trying to accomplish. The next is an Airflow variable. This is actually updated through the UI and an entry in the Airflow metadata database. As we all know, if this is written in Python, we still have Python variables. So this is used for working memory. And finally, we have environment variables open to us, which are used for passing in secrets to Airflow and so forth. So when we were looking at this from a traceability standpoint, we wanted to make sure we knew when these different pieces of data were getting updated. So having it be more traceable, we use the XComs and Python variables because those are checked into our code base. And then we have, if we're less concerned about the traceability and more interested in the ease of update, we would use an Airflow variable or an environment variable. And depending on your personal setup, the environment variables might be more trackable. All right, let's go into some common and fun use cases. So a main use case for Airflow is extract, transform, load jobs. That would be because it's very easy to move data between different sources and get them to where they need to go. You can create the custom hooks and operators with different third-party APIs if they don't exist already, which has been very easy to do. So one example of an extract, transform, load, if your company is sending out regular surveys to your customers to get a net promoter score, and you want to ingest that data into your data warehouse for the teams to understand the Net Promoter Score. You would be able to utilize a hook inside of an operator to be able to access that data, which you are initializing in the task. Another cool feature is the Slack integration. This enables you to let downstream consumers know if a task is finished, if there's been some error, things like that. We get to keep people informed and knowing what's happening, which is great. One place we use that at Blue Apron is within our BigQuery permissioning. So our start operator here, right after, we have a Slack message that gets sent to the downstream teams so they know that they're going to see some intermittent issues with their BigQuery permissioning. Then at the very end of the process, we want to let them know, hey, you can resume your day-to-day operations. So just to let you know, go back to BigQuery, it should be all set. So that's how we utilize the Slack integration here. But otherwise, we are using the BigQuery hook and operators here to be able to actually create the data sets, create the date partition tables and views, and then finally programmatically add the permissioning to these data sets. Another use case at Blue Apron that we've found very helpful is our ML squad will actually use this for feature extraction. So they have one DAG that's going to export the data they are interested in, and then another that's going to use it in Spark to either train models or predictions. All right, let's finally get into some best practices here. How I said at the beginning, I'm interested in testing, so we're going to talk about some testing. It's important for unit testing to have unit tests for all of your supporting Python functions. So if you're doing ETL jobs, your transformation, you're going to want to make sure your transformation is acting as you expect. So having a unit test here will make sure your expected behavior is met now and in the future if someone goes to update it. You can also create unit tests for custom hooks and operators to make sure you are interacting with those APIs as expected. And finally, something we found helpful is an acceptance test that runs Airflow list DAG. This is an Airflow command that will actually let you know if all of your DAGs are compiling properly. So if you've added a new DAG and also added a connection ID, because this is a new workflow, and you haven't added that yet to staging or production, you will get a failure here and know we need to update something before pushing this to production. And then the final topic I want to talk about is documentation in Airflow. It's amazing to be able to utilize the markdown templates within the DAG. So at Blue Apron, we have come up with 6 questions we like to answer for all of our workflows. We have a quick summary, just explaining what the workflow is doing. We have, is it mission critical? And that will help us determine if we need to alert in the middle of the night or if this is something that can be looked at the next day. We have what to do on failure. So if someone is on call and we have a failure and they need to figure out how to solve this, they will know what needs to be looked at. And finally, we have points of contacts and then the business use cases and other documentation. This actually lives right in your code base. So right under initializing the DAG, you're able to add this information. So we know as it changes over time if there are different points of contact or if we need to change it from going the data from one place to another and so forth. And then this gets rendered in the UI, so when the on-call person comes to look at this, they see it right away. They don't need to open up the code base. They see the error, and they go directly to the link. So in conclusion, I hope you guys understand that Airflow is a fun way to programmatically schedule your workflows. It's a great way to create custom hooks and operators, and it's quite fun to develop. So thank you very much. I do want to give a quick shout out to all of the organizers who made this possible. Having the ASL interpreters has been an amazing opportunity at this conference, and the live captioners. So thank you very much.